Hi, this is Nick Lalonde, your host of What's Next, making your third act your best act. Today you're going to hear from Brian Foster. Brian has worked in manufacturing for 39 years, serving in various executive leadership roles. What stuck out to me in my conversation with Brian is how much he's thought about what's next. He said he's only going to retire when he no longer finds purpose through work. He's having too much fun today pouring into others and watching them grow. It may even be in Brian's DNA to work beyond the normal retirement age. His mom and aunt both worked into their 80s, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Be sure to listen in when Brian talks about the quote his mom hung up in the house in his youth. I hope you'll enjoy my conversation with Brian as much as I did. Today, we're talking with Brian Foster. Brian, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Nick. It's a real pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah. Brian, super excited to talk with you. You've served as the CEO of a company. You've served as COO a couple times. You're now head of manufacturing, correct? For
Correct.
a biotech company. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do as a career now?
Sure. So the company I'm with today, my first foray into biotech, is a precision fermentation company. We're a startup building our first flagship facility. So with biotech, in short, there's a shortage of manufacturing. The available capacity today is captive for pharma or other uses. So we're building a plant to make products for others, typically proteins. So think about food without plants or animals, if you will. We won't market our own end product. We will manufacture product for other companies that they will then incorporate into their finished product.
It sounds incredible. Did you always have a passion for biotech, or have you worked in different industries?
No, Nick, I actually came into this position through a recommendation from a former CEO who was a mentor of one of the company's co-founders and recommended me. I have spent the great majority of my career in the food manufacturing space, either in just straight manufacturing operations or overall supply chain leadership, depending upon the position. So, I just always had a passion for manufacturing. And as a young man, thought, why not go into food manufacturing? Because people always have to eat. Nobody's going to go back to growing all of their own food, in their backyard. So food manufacturing has been very, very good for me. I've had a great career.
And how long have you been in the manufacturing space?
Oh, do you really want me to give that away?
Yeah.
I'm coming up on, next year will be 40 years. So
Wow.
39 years.
Wow. So how old are you today?
61.
61. Okay. Has age played a factor at all about how you think about what's next for you? And really, as some people call it, retirement?
Nick, that's a great question. I think, obviously you're a lot younger than me. And I think if you ask anyone my age or older, they would tell you, hey, I still think I'm like in my mid 20s. I don't know. I look at this person in the mirror. I'm like, who are you and where'd you come from? Right. So I don't think it does. I mean, I'm not ready to retire today. Financially, I could, but I still derive enjoyment from work. Advice I would give people, regardless of what age they think they may want to retire, is don't let your position or your current responsibility define who you are. Disentangle your ego and sense of self-worth from your job. Jobs give us lots of things, right? The first and foremost, income, benefits, the responsibility. I would say really temper your addiction to power to people, because power is very addictive. And if you, for some reason, health or otherwise, take a retirement before you're ready, I've seen that be pretty tough for people. To all of a sudden on Friday be powerful, be the leader of a company, the CEO of the corner office, and on Monday, you're debating whether you go take a tea time at 10 or at noon. And if you're prepared for that, that's great. But if you're not, I've seen some people struggle with that. So I really can't answer for me, Nick. When is the time I retire? I'll just know it, I think. When I'm no longer really feeling that I derive enjoyment from what I do, or that I'm being fulfilled in what I do, I think then I'll know it's time.
You mentioned a lot of really good things just now. So I want to walk through maybe each with you. The first I heard is, are you financially independent where you just show up to work today because you want to, not because you have to?
Correct. I am. I've been very fortunate.
What's that like? I mean, does it feel like there's like a burden lifted off you, knowing that you're just going to work because it's fun?
Um, yeah, I mean, I would say I haven't looked at it like that. It's just I view it as very fortunate. I've had some really good opportunities in my life. I don't come from privilege or money. I mean, we were as middle class comes. I guess somebody might look at me and say, well, you came from privilege if you're a middle class. But I mean, certainly I'm not a trust fund baby. I didn't, walk in the first day of work with a large account at the beck and call. So, I think I would just say I feel fortunate, and I don't think of my job as just fun. I do think I have a responsibility. I'm enjoying what I do, and certainly have a responsibility to other people, right? So there's people in the company that depend on me to do my job, for them to have a job or them to be successful. And, I think too, as I look back on my career, some of the greatest things that I feel I've accomplished is uh, seeing the development of other people with whom I've had the pleasure to work, and seeing them now in greater positions of responsibility and having improved their lot in life. And if I played some small part in their success, then I take pride in that and derive pleasure from that. So that's what my job still offers me, is the chance to do things like that.
The other thing I wanted to go back to that you mentioned previously is it's important to disentangle your identity around what you do, right? And so I want to hear more about how you've done that, because that's easier said than done. I talk to a lot of high achievers, whether they're doctors, right, and they're making a huge difference, right, in the work they're doing on a day-to-day basis, or business owners who are really prominent in the community and have made a big difference in their employees' lives as well as their clients' lives, customers' lives, and they're working 60 to 70 hours a week. This is their
Mm-hmm.
baby. And so
Mm-hmm.
stepping away from your work and splitting your identity up from that is easier said than done. How have you done that?
I'm not sure when I had that epiphany. When I was starting out of grad school in the working world, my dream one day was to have the corner suite, be the CEO of a company, lead that company. And there's a situation that I went through with a large company. It didn't affect me personally in terms of my position, but I saw people who had given their life to this company, and I won't name them. People in their 50s had spent their entire career with this company that I was with, and all of a sudden one day their job was gone, position was eliminated. We have to save money, and that taught me a couple of things. One is, employers don't necessarily have loyalty to you. I'm not casting all in the same boat. Some do, but you're an employee. I don't care what your title is or how high you are in the company. You're a CEO. You're still an employee of the company unless you're the founder, right? And you serve at a company's whim. So I think for me, and I can't give anyone else advice how to do this, but for me, I think that was the time when I thought, you got to not get so wrapped up in your title or the power or the ladder you're climbing that when you miss a rung, or when the rung breaks and you slide back down a few pegs, you can't go into a funk over that. I was just reminded of a quote I read a long time ago. It says, "Be nice to people as you're climbing the ladder. You're going to need them on the way down." And I think some people never climb the ladder back down. Some are fortunate. I think I've been very fortunate. But back to how you do that, I think you've got to replace that. I mean, if you're working 60 to 70 hours a week and you go from full on, 10, 12 hours a day to now twiddling your thumbs on the sofa at home on your first day of retirement, if you have not thought of things to fill that, it's going to be very difficult, I think. So for me, I have a wealth of hobbies, a number of friends that we enjoy getting together with. I think you've got to make it a priority for yourself, if you will. I try every year around this time of the year to write my life goals, not resolutions, but my life goals. And some stay. When I was in my 20s, Nick, you asked about
Hmm.
financial independence. When I was in my 20s, one of my life goals that I've now since passed and frankly could fulfill, but have not fulfilled. My goal was to be able to retire at 55, emotionally and financially healthy. And I made that a life goal in my 20s. And so I look at those life goals every year. Some stay on there for years, decades. Some are just for a year. They're not resolutions, but they're what do I want to accomplish with my life this year? I'll give you an example. I a few years ago earned my doctorate degree in organizational leadership. I always have laughed at my retirement job, as I say, would be to teach young people in a community college setting or some small B school setting to get them started on the path of life successfully, right? I've no desire to research, no desire to be a tenured university professor, but I had that goal for myself that I wanted to earn my doctorate degree. So, you put it on paper, and then it took me 5 years to do it, but you put it on paper and you accomplish it. So that's what I would say to someone who, business founder, successful in the community, they're working 60, 70 hours a week, is put a piece of paper in front of you. Physical paper works for me. Certainly I've used my Apple Notes and things for reminders, but put a piece of paper in front of you that you'll keep on your desk, and you look at it every day when you sit down at your desk. And on that you put, I always stuck with 5 life goals. You don't put 20 because you won't accomplish them, and then you'll feel deflated. It's like New Year's resolutions. People make a resolution, they don't accomplish it, they feel deflated. Write 3 to 5 things that you want to accomplish, and perhaps one of them, if you're that person working all those hours a week, is I want to find activities outside of work that I find meaningful and pleasurable to me. And you probably will do it, but if you don't start, my promise is you'll never do it.
Mm-hmm. So I'm really curious. When I sit down with folks and I ask them to tell me what retirement looks like for them, I hear traveling, I hear all the hobbies, I hear all the things that folks are going to do to play in retirement. But what I don't always hear about is work. So here you are, you're someone that knew you wanted to retire at 55. You're someone that could retire today. You show up to work because it gives you a sense of purpose and you really enjoy it. But you made a comment just now. You said, well, one of my goals is maybe even to teach in retirement at a business college or maybe a community college. And so why would you, knowing that you have all these hobbies and interests that you definitely want to make time for, why are you also still working in retirement though?
I enjoy it. I enjoy work. Maybe it's genetic. The bulk of my family was in healthcare, with the exception of me. I wasn't the black sheep by any stretch going into food manufacturing, but they were in healthcare. And I say that to say they had a really good careers. My aunt worked until she was 85. I think she retired in her early 80s, if memory serves, full time, but worked part time. So she worked for a hospital laboratory, and she would fill in until she was 85 for anybody vacations, somebody sick, spur of the moment they'd call her because somebody had to go home, and she'd go in. And she only retired at 85 to care for my uncle, who has since passed away when his health was failing. My mom worked until she was 83 full time, and I remember asking her at 65. I said, "So, Mom, are you going to think about retirement?" And she said, back maybe this is part of what formed me. She said, "And do what?" She said, "I know in the summertime I can get outside in the yard. She loves the garden, but she said, what do I do in the winter?" And I would tell you now, she's been retired 3 years, and she is busier now than when she was working. So I think for them and for me, we do get pleasure from work. I don't view work as tedious or onerous. I mean, certainly there's times it's stressful. There's times you've got a big project coming due. So there's certainly times that it is a little more difficult than at other times. But I think if you are not deriving pleasure from what you're doing, you're missing part of life. I mean, as I have worked with people through the years, I tell folks, particularly at times if there's some struggles or strife going on, I say, look, if you think about it, we spend more of our waking hours with people here at work than we do it with our families. And over the course of your life, you'll spend more time with at work than you will at home. Just the way the math works, right? So if you're not, I can only say for me, the day that I stop deriving pleasure, that'll be the day to retire, to hang it up. However, I would also encourage people. I have 2 children, and I raised them with this motto: it's not enough to live and just live in your community. You have to give back. You just can't breathe and take up air and exist. So you have to give back. And to anyone working, I would say find that way of giving back to the community or to people that is meaningful to you. You know, people have different hobbies, talents, and interests. So for some, it may be a church group, religious group. Others, it may be a hobby group. Others, it may be serving others in the community. Well, whatever you can derive passion and joy from, have that. So when the day you do decide to retire, you know, your whole sense of pleasure and being and worth is not gone, right? You've got other things that bring you pleasure and bring you worth. And just you find what floats your boat, right? And then go do that with passion.
Mm, mm. So I'm curious for you, when you think about retirement, what thoughts or feelings come to mind?
Um, I always joke, can I do it today? Which, having just said how much pleasure I derive from work, is a little disingenuous. But no, look, you mentioned things already. My wife and I love to travel. I have a number of hobbies. I have a number of interests outside work that I pursue, and so I look forward to those things. I think I mentioned earlier your goals in life. I think that's got to be part of your planning is what do I want retirement to look like? And my advice to young people is start now. You know, I don't care. Don't wait till you're in your 40s. It's too late. Start when you're beginning your career. Even if you're making, pick a number, X amount of money per year. Look at your future and think about what do I want my retirement to look like in today's dollars, and then plan for that, and work with smart financial planners. I had a financial planner one time who I called with a stock pick from a friend of mine, and he said, "Well, let me look into it." And he comes back and he says, "I don't think you ought to invest in that. I find it a little flaky." And I said, "Look, he's a really good friend of mine. He's not BSing me. He's told me how much money he's made on this stock. I think we should buy some." And needless to say, it got delisted after a little bit of a ride. And so he called me and he said, "Well, it's been delisted." He said, "Here's my advice going forward. You don't buy stock, and I won't make food. How about that?" So you work with a really smart financial planner to help you grow your future. So if you say, "I want X amount of money per year for retirement," and do it outside of Social Security or anything else. I mean, count on yourself and your own savings, your own work. And you got to have a little fortitude, right? I mean, I've been in the stock market a long time. There's ups and there's downs. And you got to understand as it goes up, it's going to come down, and don't get too bummed when it comes down. Just know it will go back up. But have that plan and work your plan to retire. Because again, you wait till you're 40 or 50, it's way too late, way too late.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I've heard what excites you about retirement. You mentioned travel. You mentioned some of your hobbies and interests. Is there anything that scares you about retirement?
Nick, I got to tell you, getting old, frankly, that's one of my goals is to stay healthy and active. I go to the gym 5 days a week. I try to walk 5 miles a day. I got part of my walk in today before our call. I'll get the rest in at lunch today. And yeah, you know what? You work all day long. Do you really want to go to the gym, or do you want to get up at 5 a.m. and go to the gym? But I do, because I want to be healthy in retirement. And I've seen a lot of people, go back to, I could point to several examples, but one is Bear Bryant. I'm not necessarily a Bama fan, but I always thought he was a classy coach. He retired, and within a few months he was dead. That scares me, right? So that's why I just say getting older. I mean, your health is not guaranteed to you. Your life's not guaranteed to you. I could get hit by a car. So that's what scares me, frankly, is things outside of my control, right? I can control my spending. I can control how much money I invest. I can control travel and hobbies, but I can't control the things that inevitably come as you live longer. Now, again, genetically, I hope that's in my genes. Everyone on my mom's side has lived well into their 90s or low 100s. So hopefully I got that gene as well. But, that's what scares me, to answer the question.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, you mentioned that you would likely retire when you no longer feel a sense of purpose through your work. And today you find immense purpose. What would give you purpose in this next chapter of life, or when you do transition into retirement?
Well, that's why, I mentioned, somewhat jokingly, my retirement job, right? Teaching in a small community, because I derive pleasure from helping other people, right? So it's that in that next act, it's how do I channel what I'm doing at work into developing other people or helping other people in that next phase of my life. What are those activities? And it might be, I actually keep an eye on the community college job posting board. There's a pretty robust community college system out here in Scottsdale and Phoenix. And not that I would take one with my job today, but just kind of keep my eye on it. So what positions are out there? What qualifications does one need? Who are they looking for? So I think that would be for the replacement for me. And I've planned for that. I've mentioned planning quite a few times, but I've planned for that.
My last question for you, and always in this exercise with this question. So you've had a long career in manufacturing. You've been doing this almost 4 decades. Knowing what you know now, is there anything that you would have done differently over the course of your career?
Oh yeah, I look, do I have regrets? Yeah, you always have regrets. Would I change some things? Sure, I would. I think if I said no, there's absolutely nothing I would change, Nick, that I would be lying, right? I mean, it's not been that storybook of a career, right? I've made some missteps. I've made some mistakes. If I had a chance to go back and do some things again, I would. I've taken jobs with companies that, in hindsight, I probably should not have taken, right? And so I would not have done a few things. So I think but I say that, Nick, I would say too, you can't live your life with regrets, because no more than I can have control over the things in my future, like my lifespan or some terrible disease afflicting me. I can't go back and undo the past. So at some point you have to come to terms with the past. At least I do. Maybe others don't have to do that, but you come to a sense of peace with your past and mistakes you've made, things you've done, people you've harmed, not physically, but you got angry with a family member. Maybe you didn't speak for some years or whatnot. But whatever that is for me or for someone else, you got to make your own peace with that, because you can't change. You can't do anything about it. My mother. So I'll say this: my real father passed when I was pretty young. I had the great fortune of my mother marrying a wonderful man a few years later, who became my stepfather, that I always called Dad. He never introduced me to anything other than his son. So he was really, really good to me and good for me. But in those few years in between my father passing and my mom remarrying, my mother had a lot of worry and stress. I mean, single mom, right? Today, there's single parents far more prevalent. But back then, single mom trying to put a roof over our heads, food on the table. And she had a desk lamp on her desk. And I've always remembered that she had cut out of a magazine of some sort a quote and taped it to that desk lamp. And it said, "Worry is a fast getaway on a wooden horse." So I've always tried to live my life without worry, without regrets. Now, do I have regrets? I've already said, sure I do. But my kids growing up, I said, look, don't ever worry about anything. If you can change it, go change it. If you can't change it, don't worry about it, because it's not in your control anyway, right? So back to health and retirement, I can impact that by working out, by walking, by being healthy, eating right, not always eating what I want to eat, right? Right. I would eat a lot of other things, but those are things I can change. So I'm not worried about a disease in my future. If it happens, I'll deal with it. So I think that I would go back and change some things, but I don't stew over them, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. What a good reminder, though, that we should focus on what we can control. So often, like you said, worry, anxiety stems from the things that we can't control. And so I love that quote that Mom cut out and hung up. Brian, I'll say this: when you do launch this class at whatever college it is, I want to take it. Hopefully there'll be an online portion, just because Dallas to Scottsdale is a little bit of a commute.
Yeah, but we have nicer weather this time of year.
That's right. That's enticing. Well, Brian, this has been a lot of fun having you on the show today. Thank you so much for coming on and just giving a little bit of wisdom to the listeners, but also just sharing your experience with how you're approaching what's next for you. I can tell you really spent a lot of time thinking about it.
You got to make a plan, Nick, and then you utilize professionals like yourself to help your plans come true. And so I would say thank you for having me on today. Thank you for the invitation. I've enjoyed our time together, and wish you the best.
Thank you, Brian. Take care.